It's Father Francis, the Faith Guy, with a little homiletic reflection on this fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time. Jesus says that righteous people will shine in the darkness. You can see all around me, I'm pretty much in the dark. But I think it's kind of a nice effect. And I'm going to use it to hopefully illuminate the gospel this weekend. Also, I happen to have here a trusty bag of salt. Oops, there we go. A nice bag of natural salt. Okay? So, we're going to look at salt and light this weekend in our reflection. You know, it's interesting, salt and light. You know, Jesus kind of tells us in this gospel, or he leads us to maybe kind of ask ourselves some questions. Well, he says, what if the salt loses its savor, its flavor, its saltiness? What about that? You know, when we say something is salty, well, you know, salt has been probably one of the early spices. It probably goes all the way back, obviously, to antiquity. And, you know, we all know when food is bland. Now, again, I'm not here to try to tell you got to salt everything, you know, before you eat it, like some people, like myself, do. But the fact is that a lot of times people will just put a little bit of salt on their food because it does add a little bit of flavor. You know, there's just something about, you know, a little dash of salt that kind of just makes things just right. When we talk about, say, for example, when I was in the Marine Corps, we would say to about, a person who had been in a long time, a veteran who maybe had 20 years, maybe 20 plus years, maybe even almost 30 years, we'd say they were salty, you know. That meant that they were mature, they weren't new, they knew the ropes, okay? You know, even in the Navy, they say he's an old salt. You know, again, meeting somebody who has been there, who knows what they're talking about. You can rely on them pretty much to tell you the straight scoop, okay? So salt is a good thing. They used to preserve meat with salt. Again, the days when they didn't have refrigeration. So again, very handy to have salt, okay? Light, you know, let's face it, it's pretty hard to read a book when you don't have a light. I love those little night lights that you just clip on your book, and that way you can, you know, the rest of the room can be kind of dark like this, but that little light, just that little light is enough that you can read by, and it's very comforting. Jesus again asked this interesting and peculiar question. He goes, well, what if the salt loses its savor? What if the light doesn't hold back the darkness? You know, I always thought that was kind of a curious statement. You know, I've always thought, I stopped and I kind of scratched my head kind of thinking, gosh, you know, I guess you got to throw that stuff out. You know, if the light doesn't work, you know, you go out and get a new one, I guess. I don't know. Our first reading tells us today that if we want to be salt and light, a curious thing has to happen. Instead of us going out and, you know, kind of trying to get things for ourselves, you know, storing up acorns for the winter like squirrels do, we're kind of told that, you know, if we want to receive, we have to give to those who are truly in need. And at first it kind of seems like, well, you know, why do I have to give to this bum who's, you know, with a sign saying we'll work for food, you know, a guy who's kind of grubby and probably hasn't had a shave in a couple of weeks, you know, and well, anyway, you know, and probably has a sign that says he's going to work for food, and we know what he really wants. He just wants some money so he can go buy some beer or some booze, maybe some drugs or something nefarious, right? I don't know. You know, Jesus basically tells us in these readings that, you know, we're just to help people. We're not to judge them. We're not to, you know, belittle them. We're not to even question them, really, you know. Now, here's the curious thing, though. what I think is really curious is that it says, if you do these things for these people, then these other good things are going to happen to you. So in some ways, it's cyclic. When I do a good deed for somebody, yes, that person will benefit, but there's something spiritual going on. God is going to be, if you will, rewarding me. Not that I do it so I can be rewarded, but he tells us that in this first reading that if we do these things, our wounds are going to heal up. All of a sudden, good things are going to come to us. That sounds interesting. And then Jesus tells us about this curious properties of salt and light. And what's interesting is, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you ever threw out a box of salt? I never have. Salt pretty much remains pretty salty. When was the last time you had to, throw out the birthday candles because the darkness was, bigger than the little birthday candle? Well, this candle's not working. The darkness is flooding it out. No. Doesn't matter how big the light is, the light will still shine in the darkness. No matter how small that candle is, no matter how big the room is, filled with darkness, that one little candle is still going to light. It's not defective. And I think it's just interesting that in this week we talk about salt and light, and he calls us to be salt and light for the world. So hopefully you're salty and you're all lit up this week as we celebrate this 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time. God bless.